I was just seeing if you could auditorily hear the click.
Yeah.
Of the Neo Geo Pocket Colors
Ooh.
analog little stick nub guy there.
You got an actual Pocket Color?
Of course, I'm a sicko. It's modded. Everyone knows this. I didn't just get any Neo Geo Pocket Color.
Yeah, you got one with a backlight.
I figured you were just playing this on the
IPS
analog.
modded, backlight, Neo
I figured
Geo
you were just
Pocket
playing this
Color.
on the analog, man.
I mean, I am, but I also bought a Neo Geo.
You're
Pocket
playing
Color.
Capcom versus SNK at 60 frames per second.
On a Wii U.
I think it was, it might be natively that.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Pursuing Pixels. My name's Kevin Portelli, and I'm here tonight with John Hines.
Hey there.
And Randall Nolery.
Hey, folks.
And we are back, as always, to talk about some video games, back in action for the first time in a little while. I just got back in town after a Chicago trip. John and I, our band, played our first show in like 5 years. So actually a little bit over 5 years. So running on fumes a little bit here on my end. Yeah, haven't done a ton of gaming, although I did get a little gaming in while I was on my trip, and that's going to be probably what I'm going to talk about in a little bit here. But why don't we... kick the ball off with John here with some of the stuff, or one of the games that you've been playing lately.
Yeah. So I've been playing a game called Pseudoregalia, which is a platform game that came out last year, made in the kind of N64 era graphics and like 3D platformer design, but with a metroidvania as the main like inspiration and gameplay loop. And it is a lot of combat and platforming in these large 3D spaces, very reminiscent of, you know, the Collectathon N64 games in terms of scope and size, but with a lot more of modern sensibilities of like game design, as well as especially in Metroidvanias and like the whole, like, you'll get this new ability which will open up this new like path that you couldn't access before, and it has a lot of unlocking things out of order. Like, there's no set order that you unlock things. I actually spent a significant amount of the game without a map, and that was just because I took a one turn down one of the opening areas as opposed to another and just kept heading down that direction.
Yes.
And was thinking to myself, this is incredibly difficult to navigate because it's a massive game. Like, everything that I read about it said that it's a relatively short game, and I don't know how other people play games, but I like to check every single nook and cranny and interact with every single thing. So it has not been a short game for me personally, but I am very like in love with the fact that I'm not blowing through it, even though it says that it's on the shorter end of things. But
I was gonna say, is it short for like a Metroidvania? Like, because I feel like in my head when I think of like a full blown, like if it's like an actual like Metroid game per se, like I'm kind of expecting it to be like a 30-hour game or something like that. So maybe if it's like shorter than that.
That's the thing, is that like I think it is a Metroidvania in the Metroid like vein of things, in that it is specifically built for speed running, and that I think that if you know and memorize where the optimal path to getting all the power-ups are, I think you can beat it in a really quick amount of time, because like I play Metroid games like excruciatingly, like looking for every single secret and touching every single like corner, but you can 100% those games in like a few hours, if like that.
But I would say most people, I could be wrong, I guess, but I would say most people probably play them more like you do, like kind of combing, just looking for secrets, and aren't necessarily like, okay, how can I rip through this as fast as I can or whatever.
And I think that's like the split between like this game is designed with an optimal path in mind, but like most people are going to not know. Obviously, when you first play the game, you're not going to know where every power up that unlocks the new areas. So you're constantly going from like this area and being like, oh, well, I didn't now I have the map. I'm like, oh, I never actually explored that path, or I can see that there's this doorway that I never went through. And then I'll trek across the entire map to realize, oh yeah, I don't have the power up that I need to get through that area. So then I'm like, all right, now I have to trek across the map to go to another area. But the entire experience of doing that is enjoyable, and that's what I love. And the way that it controls the combat is like really fluid, although like a little simplistic, and there's not a ton there. But if you're comparing it to like N64 games of the era, it's
like Banjo-Kazooie or something.
Like it is so far like better than any of those games ever were, because it again is trying to translate modern game design and sensibility and combat sensibilities back to an era that did not have all of those trappings or learning the lessons from those things. So like,
I love that games are doing that. I love that there's just like this whole subgenre, that like, and I think you had said that before, John, like that your sweet spot is like that kind of 64 or 128-bit, but with modern sensibilities. And like, oh, that's awesome.
There are times when I'm doing like movement combos in Pseudoregalia that it is very reminiscent of like Super Mario Odyssey when you're using Cappy to link together things, and it's like just getting that level of precision and movement, or like combos of things that you never would be able to do in like the N64 era, but like still have it look like that, or like have like, all right, there are 2 textures total in this room and I'm doing stuff that is bonkers, and it's great. I'm really having a fun time. I don't think I'm close to beating it. I think that there are 5 MacGuffins you need to get, and I think I found one. And
oh, geez! And how much time do you feel like you've put in so far?
Maybe 15 hours or so.
Oh, geez!
But again, I'm poking around and prodding every single thing. I'm getting into a giant area and being like, all right, what is everything I can get at this point in time? And like, even if it's not necessarily like, I think part of it is also built and like get levels are designed so that there is a correct way to do things, or if you have a certain power up that it's a lot easier to get. But I think they are also laid out so that if you hit every jump, every wall jump, every combo on the exact perfect frame, you can get there. And I've done it a few times, and it feels really good to do.
I love that.
Okay.
Break it early.
I love that too.
Have your own experience.
There's nothing more like, frustrating is not the right word, but I kind of, for whatever reason, like one of the, I was going to say one of the Ori games, but it had to be the first one because I've never played the second one. But I remember explicitly there being like a jump where I kept trying to like double jump up to this spot for like the longest time. I was like, I feel like I can make it, but I'm not sure. And then like I eventually gave up, and then like later unlocked, or maybe I just saw that you can get like a triple jump or some new mechanic, and I was like, oh, well, I guess I couldn't have made that jump all along. But like that, knowing that you can like, hey, if I just execute this perfectly, I can get there. That's actually kind of sweet, especially in 3D space, no less.
Yeah.
It also incorporates wall jumps in a way that really does use a lot of horizontal movement. So you're not only doing like a wall jump, like say in Mario, where you're just doing like basically a 2D vertical wall jump. This is a lot more is like, all right, you're using this wall jump to clear a horizontal gap. So you need to hit wall jumps at like 45-degree angles or like shallower to get the maximum distance. And that was actually
a long jump.
Really difficult to like
Titanfall style or whatever.
Is that
the right game?
Yeah, using a wall run almost, but like you're still trying to like position yourself to hit various obstacles and like propel yourself forward. It's got a lot of really interesting platforming as well as like fun combat in a way that I never really would have expected or have never experienced in like a more simplistic, say, like 3D game in terms of like it's purposefully so, like trying to do something that's stripped down, bare bones, but getting the maximum amount out of it.
I love that.
Yeah. I'm actually really glad that you brought this game back to my attention, because it was one that I remember seeing like on social media somewhere, the developer probably or the publisher, whatever, somebody posting about it. And then it just, with the name like kind of just like caught my eye as like, oh, the game with the confusing name, or just I didn't like register what the name of it was. And then when you mentioned it, like it kind of vaguely rung a bell. And when I looked it up, I was like, oh, this game. So I'm super pumped that you brought it to mind, because it's one that, of course, I'm always like, maybe I'll wait for a console release. But this one's like one of those where I'm like, who knows if this will ever come to consoles. So yeah, maybe it should just spring for it on Steam or wherever. I don't know if you can get it on itch as well, but
looks like you might be able to. Yeah.
Nice.
Both, potentially.
Nice.
And
the vibes are immaculate. Like, it's got such a good feel for the like visual aspects as well as the sound. Like, it is hitting on all cylinders in every aspect.
Yeah, I feel like we may have even talked about this before on a time that we've talked about this aesthetic, but is there any reason why you lean calling it like N64 over PS1? Just because like when I see it, I immediately go, this is like a PS1 game to me.
Just because I owned an N64 and I didn't own a PlayStation. That's literally the only reason.
Gotcha. I get
these
in
polygons don't look as much like they're based out of triangles for one, so that's something. Yeah.
Yeah, in my mind, like Anodyne 2
I
and
feel
whatever.
like
Go ahead.
PSX era had like more involved textures, whereas I feel like the N64 had more like tile set textures.
Yeah. I can see that.
Space on CD, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like on PlayStation they just tried to blur it, like just put like some kind of blurry texture on there.
Yeah, we took a photo and we descaled it until it was like 3 pixel or like 3 different colors.
Oh, brother. Oh man, well if you're good on that one there for now, John, I definitely want to check that one out though.
Me too. Like I saw like, oh, one of the best searches is like Pseudoregalia Xbox. Oh no, is there a release? No, not yet. Dang it.
Oh man, I'll be on the lookout for a
PC
console release
for
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess we're talking a little Metroidvania action here. I've been playing some more Gunbrella. I talked a little bit about that one on Save It for the Cast a little while back, and I hadn't had a chance to really dive into it since then. But while I was in Chicago visiting John, well, not just visiting John, getting our show together and everything, but while John was at work a lot of the days, I was just crashing at his place. So I was like, all right, for at least a couple of days, like plopped my Switch onto his dock, played a little games, and I did like one good long session with Gunbrella while I was in Chicago, and then I actually just last night or maybe the night before had another good long session with it again. And I'm really enjoying myself. I'm kind of like on the fence about this one because I really like Gato Roboto is one of my favorite, quote unquote Metroidvanias. Yeah. I'll put it in quotes because I know it's like, it's basically a game with like 4 or 5 different levels that just happen to be like loosely stitched together, but you really kind of clear them all independently in that game. And Gunbrella is kind of working similarly, but in my mind, I was like buying this game, like basically being like, all right, this is basically Gato Roboto 2, but like, just in a new setting, new mechanics and whatever, but really kind of looking for that kind of same sort of experience. And I'm not quite getting that, but I will say I'm enjoying the experience I am getting. There's a little more story involved here where you're like going into like different towns and different settings. Like you'll hop on like a subway, ride into town, and then there'll be like kind of like a non-combat section. You'll just kind of talk to people. You can buy stuff from certain people or sell stuff to them that you collect from either certain enemies or that you kill or whatever. You can, just get various things that you can collect and sell back and whatnot. You can even sell the stuff that you buy back. But like I've been enjoying the ebb and flow of the gameplay in terms of like, okay, because I play like the default difficulty is hard mode, so I just kind of went with that, and it is pretty tough. Now that I'm getting the hang of it a little more, I'm like, okay, I'm learning how to like, because a lot of these enemies, like as soon as they see you, they're really like reactive to what you're doing, and they really like just kind of swarm you pretty quickly, whether they're like firing bullets at you or just like there's some animals, there's some like just kind of regular like humanoid, I don't know if they're humans or robots or whatever, but enemies that are chasing you around, but they'll like, as soon as they see you, they're just going nuts. And I don't know if that's a little bit different in, on normal or on easy, which is good to know that there are those different difficulty settings. But I'm always like, hey, whatever the default is, I'm just going to at least try it there to start. And I'm not like, now that I'm getting the hang of it, I'm not totally getting my ass kicked, but you really do have to like kind of watch, every enemy and like kind of prepare yourself going into each. Okay, there might be a stretch where I might not be able to save for a minute because you have to sit on these like blue couches to save your progress.
Nice.
Hollow Knight style, like sit on a bench or whatever. And then sometimes it's they're pretty generous with them. Like they'll give you one right before a boss, or even if there's not a bench, it'll give you like a checkpoint right before a boss. But they're otherwise like you might go through a pretty long stretch. But the nice thing is any enemies that you clear once you do hit a save point, they're like cleared for good. So if you do any backtracking or anything like that, unlike most Metroidvania games, like they're cleared for good. But
is there experience
similarly,
carryover? Is there like an experience bar happening too? Like
nothing
on top of that, or is it
nothing crazy on like an experience bar so far? I did just recently get like a half a heart container sort of thing. So I'm of the impression, like at first I was like, man, this game seems like it's going to be pretty short because there's like 4 subway stops, and I was like, oh, is this going to be kind of like Gato Roboto 2 in that regard? Like I'm just going to go to these 4 stops, explore the town, then explore like the sewers and the various spots underneath. But it's got like a lot more like world building going on. Like, like the area I'm in right now, there's like a speakeasy, and I got to go like meet somebody in town and get the password for the speakeasy, and then go over there and, talk to somebody over there. Actually, that's like the next task I need to do. So I haven't gone back to the speakeasy just yet, but like the mayor was kidnapped right at the start. Well, actually, at the start of the game, it's kind of cliche, like your wife's dead or your family's dead or whatever, and you're like, you find this Gunbrella, and you're like, okay, I got to find who is this? Whoever left this here killed my family. So, and that's kind of your, going on your adventure in that regard. But I don't know. I'm like, I'm getting in the groove with it. I'm like struggling with it at times, but I'm having fun. I don't know quite how to. But where this game lands for me, because like it even like it plays like a twin stick shooter platformer at times, and it does have like you can jump with like one of the face buttons, but you can also use one of the shoulder buttons, and I keep kind of alternating between the two because there's just times where like, oh yeah, I can just kind of like run and gun Mega Man style and just kind of aim with the left stick as I move along. But then there are times where I'm like, okay, I really need to be like moving away from the enemy, but while I aim back at it while I'm running in the opposite direction. So I really need to use that twin stick aiming and whatnot. So it's kind of like I'm struggling to get in the groove with the controls, but it's still not too tough. And the checkpoints are generous enough for the most part. Once you kind of like, there are a couple sections where I'm just like, okay, I got to get this down, take my time. But I'm really having fun with that one. I'm enjoying, like, it's the perfect game to like turn off the lights. The music's really like kind of vibey and jazzy and film noir-y, as is like just the whole theme of the game and presentation. The pixel art's amazing. Just having a lot of fun with that one. It's not quite the Gato Roboto 2 that I was hoping it would be, but it's its own thing. I'm not going to complain, and I'm going to keep exploring because it does seem like it's going to branch out beyond this like subway system. So I'm kind of curious to see, where it goes from there. And the one thing that's a little bit, go ahead.
If you're sticking with it, that's something to be said though, because like
that's not my style.
You're not one for Metroidvanias as a genre, I would say, generally speaking. So
yeah, and
getting stuck in your craw, and just the curiosity to keep pushing.
It definitely has that going on for sure, and it does help that I've really liked the games from the developer previously, so that obviously helps the cause to be like, okay, I want to see this one through. But yeah, it's just a lot of fun. The movement's really fun. It would be another one that would be really fun for speed running because the way you can use that umbrella to just like launch yourself around, I feel like people could just go nuts with like the movement tech in this game. And then another game that I kind of wanted to just give a quick shout out to, just because I got some good co-op sessions in with sessions, because DJ and I got 2 good quality hangs in and got some co-op gaming in. And honestly, this is a game, it's called Nobody Saves the World. I keep wanting to call it Nobody Versus the World, but Nobody Saves the World, and this is a game from Drinkbox Studios, which I didn't realize until we started playing it. Like I saw it on the splash screen, I was like, isn't that the Guacamelee developers? And it is. And they've made a few other games, but those Guacamelee games, actually speaking of Metroidvanias, were pretty fun in that regard. But in this game, kind of has some Metroidvania elements, but more of like in the top-down, Zelda style sort of things. And there might even be some roguelike elements. DJ and I didn't die in any of the dungeons. We did die, but not like collectively to where we got like a game over, quote unquote. But I do think it kind of has a little bit of that like Swords of Ditto vibe going on, where when you go back into the dungeon, that dungeon reshuffles and procedurally generates, but the overworld stays the same. But I'm not sure. We never died, and I don't really know for sure. But the core conceit of this game is you like play as this like kind of shell of a human nobody. I don't even think there's a name for your character. But then as you move along, you have this like broken magic wand, and it's got a similar art style to the Guacamelee games, a little bit different. One that wouldn't grab my attention right away. I think I even fired this game up on Game Pass briefly when it came out and was just like, it's not grabbing my attention. But since it was couch co-op, we were like, and DJ recommended. He's like, I think you might like this one. So we decided to fire it up for a little bit. And after getting like a little bit into it, it's pretty cool. Like, it's not one, again, if we weren't playing couch co-op, I don't know how sucked into the game I would have got. But it's like you basically start out as, again, this humanoid character. But then as you progress and like move up this skill tree, you start unlocking a ton of different forms. So you get like an archer, you get a knight, you get a horse, you get a turtle, you get a slug, you get a I don't know, there are a few other animals that we got so far, but like, for example, like once you get the turtle, you're now able to like go in water on the overworld or anywhere on the map. So now you can like swim to these other little islands that otherwise you couldn't have got to before. Maybe you'll be able to open a bridge or do something later in the game to let other characters walk that way, but you can basically just select. There's like a pause menu, but then any of your like whatever most 8 or 9 recent characters or forms that you've selected will be on like a radial menu that you can then swap between and pull up at any time. And then they'll start to like, every character has their own attacks and their own abilities, and then later in the game it lets you start like using these like, I don't know what they were, some kind of potions or some kind of chips that you had to collect that you could then take the abilities from other characters' forms and pair them with other forms, because you're like, hey, I like this character's main attack, but I want this character's secondary attack, because they're all the attacks kind of like Pokemon style, have like a, like a poison or like a type to them, like even just like sharp or something like that. And then certain enemies will be color coded. Like, okay, I have to attack this enemy with a sharp attack to break its shield so that I can then attack it with any other enemy. One of the other forms you can get is like a rat, so you can like shrink down to size and squeeze through some tinier tunnels and stuff like that. And it's kind of like the gameplay's a little bit repetitive, a little bit like, like Diablo or any of those like top-down RPG or Gauntlet, I guess, for lack of a better comparison. I'm not saying either of these to diminish any of those games. Like it's the one thing I'll say is like the combat can be a little bit boring. Like you're pretty much just holding down a button, like nonstop. Like you just hold it down and you'll attack at whatever clip that you attack at, and then your secondary attack has a cooldown or whatever. But it'll keep like throwing for every form. There's different challenges. So like for the knight, for example, your secondary attack is like a stomp. So then it'll be like stomp 15 enemies, and then once you do that, you get a new challenge. It upgrades your skill tree a little bit, and then it's like now stomp 3 enemies simultaneously, and you have to do that like 25 times, and then you keep unlocking stuff. Now the annoying thing is that every time you do one of those things, you have to actually go into the pause menu and like redeem that challenge that you got, and it like plays a little sequence. It was just like, why did they do it? Like there's like a few choices in the game there, exactly. Like they want you to like push the button and get that gambling satisfaction of just like exactly where I don't really get why they don't just automatically have this stuff pop up, because otherwise it's like a really thoughtfully designed game in so many ways, like especially for co-op. Like if anyone like talks to a character or goes into a room, like it immediately teleports that other player right to the other, whoever went into the new area. It's just everything, like it actually, like it's almost so seamless that you have to like get used to like, oh wait, where'd I go, and then you realize, okay, as long as now that we know how that works, it actually works out really, really well. But I actually, more than anything, I had a ton of fun playing a co-op game with DJ again, because it's been so long. But I'm really glad he kind of talked me into firing this one up again, because even when he suggested it, I was like, let's maybe play something else. This doesn't look up my alley per se. He's like, no, just trust me, give it a try. You might dig it. And we had a lot of fun. I don't know if we'll ever get around to finishing it, because it actually does have online play, but I don't think I'm going to go around to buying it so that we can play it online together and finish it. But nonetheless, if I was still in Chicago for another week or something, I could have seen us polishing the game off depending on how long it is. And it did have some great music. I will give a shout out to in general. I wasn't, the presentation, it might be your thing. It might not be. It's more of like a hand-drawn, has a little bit of that Guacamelee flavor, but it's like more of like a cleaner, almost like, I was gonna say less stylized, but it's got a great sense of humor. There's a cool, like, almost pseudo 3D-ness to the visuals, especially in the cutscenes and stuff. But yeah, just a fun couple of games that I've been kind of chipping away at or playing over the last couple of weeks while I've been super busy. But yeah, I'm hoping to get some more gaming in now that I'm back in my apartment and everything. But yeah, why don't we kick it over to you, Randall, to wrap us up this evening?
Yeah. So in more niche retro video game corner.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
I'm continuing on my deep dive of the Neo Geo Pocket Color. I went nuts about Match of the Millennium, I think the last time we recorded a while back. And I'm now here to be blown away by yet another Neo Geo Pocket Color game. And I will say, to be fair,
as are we.
I was not blown away on the front side. It was something that took me, like, the first few times that I tried to play this game, I'm like, yeah, I see what they're doing here. I just don't know if this is for me. Like, we'll see. But I'm like, like everyone says, this is like the killer. This is like one of the system sellers. SNK versus Capcom, Card Fighters Clash, and specifically the Capcom edition, because this is 1999, boys and girls, and this is during a time period where everything had to be like Pokemon, where we had 2 SKUs for video games.
Oh, brother.
Speaking of Mega Man things, Mega Man did this with Battle Network, and during this era that happened after Pokemon, everything had to have 2 different versions, and
kind of forgot about that. Yeah,
if you're a real sicko, you bought both versions yourself and traded with your own damn self. And if you had friends at school, maybe you could do that. But this is specifically pretty Pokemon-esque visually, in that it is most of the game is played kind of like top-down 2D RPG, turn of the millennium style. It's like, picture Pokemon, original Pokemon view, but like, more like Game Boy Color, but on steroids sort of visual aspects going on when you're kind of walking around these areas. And this is ultimately a deck builder game. This is more akin to something like, Pokemon card game than it would be to Pokemon, if we're going to keep that analogy, where you are building a deck. You start off with a 50-card deck, and it's all based on SNK and Capcom properties, essentially. So you're getting characters from both of those games. I'm currently playing the Capcom version, so it's more the Capcom characters and properties in this one. But of course, I bought both, so eventually I'll get to the SNK version. But starting on this one, and God, there's a ton of cards. I think in 11 hours so far, I've only unlocked like 80 some of 300 cards on this version.
Dang.
So, yeah. And, 50 cards, most of them are kind of, you base your deck out of 2 different types of cards. There's character cards. And, you've got your typical, you might have Street Fighter characters like Ryu or Ken and their individual cards, or you might have Mega Man, or, different properties. You might have, one of the guys, Terry or something from SNK games, whatever. But you yourself personally, a la like Magic the Gathering, have your own hit points. So it's very Magic the Gathering, but simplified at its core, I would say.
Okay.
You have your own hit points, typically 2,000. If it's a boss battle, it'll be 3,000. And then you play most average character cards. You can only play 1 per turn. And then the difference is there's no separate mana cards to play. If you're doing the Magic the Gathering analogy, the character cards themselves have mana associated them, which is, the special points, the SP. And, every character card might have, the battle points might be, if it's a big character, it might be like a 700. And that's 700 both to attack with and its defense. And, if it gets hit by another character, that gets reduced as 1 number. But it also has these special points, the SP, which is the magic, the energy cost that's paying into your kind of pool that you can use for things. So it's, if you play this card that's got, 400 BP, that's the character's attack / defense power, and 300 SP, that's its mana that is now put into your mana pool that you can use with action cards, which are the other type of cards. And those, like, you know, again, with Magic, like a sorcery or an instant card is something that you can play if you have the given energy available. And, you know, that can do a lot of different actions in the playfield. You can, you know, directly attack another character a la like a fireball card in Magic or something, or an enemy. You might be able to, you know, draw an additional card or, you know, do certain things like that. There's a lot of abilities that, you know, are there. So there's kind of immediately, you know, a meta game that's involved there where, you know, a card at first glance might seem weak in that it only has, you know, 200 or 300 for its like attack and defense points, but it's got a lot more of these special points that would add to your pool, and maybe it's got this passive ability that goes along with it. So then you get into kind of the deck building aspect as you're winning games and you're getting cards from these other characters, and you're kind of changing out some of the shitty cards you got to start with much better cards that have more utility as you're kind of building this out. And, you know, certain characters can back up other characters, like Sakura or Ken might back up Ryu, you know, but not other characters. And if you do that, they combine together, and now instead of Ryu being a 500 battle points character, he's an 800 because they combine together. And, you know, there's only 3 slots. They've simplified this compared to Magic, where you can only have 3 characters out at any given point.
That's kind of what I love about it, to be honest. Like, as you're talking about it, I'm like, man, Magic streamlined. Like,
very
I'm
streamlined
all about this.
Very streamlined. And it's hard to describe in just an audio format. But man, have I got just completely hooked on it by just sticking with it. And mostly playing on the analog pocket with that adapter. But then, you know, I'm like, okay, there's too many of these good, stupid games. I'm going to buy this stupid Neo Geo Pocket Color that's modded with a backlight and a clicky stick so that it's easier to do the fighting games in particular. But great pixel art in this game, Card Fighters Clash. And it's just so intuitive now with just, again, 2 main buttons, 3 if you include the pause button that gives you more data on like this specific card. You know, at first it's a little intimidating in that it's so simplified. It's so, you know, 8-bit, 12-bit maybe, that a lot of it's just like text menus as you're kind of sifting through cards in your deck, or potential cards to insert into your deck, or potential cards to trade in the trade machine for a random card that might come out that, like, you're like, what is that card? It's just the font. It says I have this many. Like, it takes a while to like get over that hump, I guess, but it's well worth sticking with it to do so, because it's so rewarding. I can see why this game has such a cult following and why they released DS versions, why the Switch re-release happened, and one of the main games that they're talking about is these games, these SNK versus Capcom Card Fighter Clash games, both versions. I
was going to say Match of the Millennium is on Steam, but you describing this card game, I was like, man, I wish this one was on.
Yes,
but I might get it on Switch just because that the way you're describing it. And yes, the first thing that like came up, I don't research any of these games that you talk about because I really like having them be a surprise when you talk about them. Yes. And like the thing that as soon as you started mentioning is like, oh yeah, it's like a streamlined version of Magic. I was like, God damn it, this is another game that I want or like wish that there were more availability of. Yeah,
same. Like I went and bought mostly out of nostalgia. I went like, there was a Pokemon card game, that they released for Game Boy Color or whatever. Like I loved to play. I played some of the actual Pokemon card game back when it came out. I went to that first stupid Pokemon movie and got the Mew promo card. Like it just it wasn't that great of a card, but whatever. I just liked those sort of card games. So this exists and it's so much more streamlined. I've already completed 4 of the, tournament, whatever, call it a gym, whatever challenges out of 6. But like I said, I'm nowhere close to unlocking all the cards, and let alone the interplay between the 2 versions, of course, because we have to have that sort of Pokemon influence of trading cards back and forth, and the extra little, MacGuffin that you get to add by having a traded card versus the one that you got with your own home version. Yeah, it's really good. There's so much charm here too. You can tell it's just designed with love. Like SNK was on a roll with this thing, and it kind of flopped as a system, but man, there's a lot here in a short amount of time, a la the Dreamcast. There's a lot of parallels there.
Just gonna say that. Yep, it's like the handheld Dreamcast.
Yeah, it really is.
Little ahead of its time in terms of like the visual. There's nothing on handheld wise that looked quite like that at the time.
Yeah, no, there's not, and I think it's stood the test of time for me. I'm goddamn hooked on it. It's perfect for me to turn on and just play for 20, 30 minutes. And, sometimes the matches can be a little bit of, kind of a slog down the road, is like, all right, I keep putting out my characters because, God damn it, you're not going to kill me for the last 500 points. And, I can keep mustering as I pull, I'm drawing 1 card per turn, but there's another character, like I'm throwing it out there, it's going to survive. And, they still follow the same rules with summoning sickness or whatever. You can't attack on your first. There's a lot of that sort of stuff that's very informed, I think, by Magic in a very good way. Yeah. But even with those, little gripes of, matches taking a little bit of time, I love it. It's a keeper for me. One of my favorites that I've tried out so far for the console.
That's awesome, man, because I feel like sometimes when you're like picking up a retro game, like with that kind of hype going into it, or knowing it's like a cult classic, like it can sometimes be a bust when you're like, this game's going to be be amazing. And it's just like, ooh, maybe you had to be there kind of thing. I know.
And I thought that might have been the case there at first. I'm like, this isn't really grabbing me. And like, why is it that this one character I'm putting out, he immediately dissolves as soon as I put him on the playfield? Like, oh no, it's because I needed 10 special points first before I could play him, because he has his own built-in mana cost, because he's 1,000 points instead of your average 400 or whatever. Yeah, it's just like, there's just layers on layers. It's good. I'll be playing more of this game. There's no doubt. I'm going to see this one all the way through for a fact.
Heck yeah,
and then I'm going to play the other version.
Heck yeah, that's saying something for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just love that you keep finding these games that I've never heard of and that I've never thought of, and then as soon as I hear about them, I'm like, God damn it, I need to find a way to play this.
This will be a Neo Geo Pocket podcast before we know it. So.
Let's do it. I'm going to buy that Switch. There's a couple of Switch volumes of it, and I'm like, I'll
have to look into that.
Those. Yeah, just because I should just.
Is it a straight up port of like this version, like visually and everything, or is it like a remake?
I think they're ports, but I think they've done some enhancements of some of the Neo Geo Pocket stuff where, like, I want to say at least for like the fighting games, you can do 2-player locally, which otherwise, in the old version, you would have needed 2 consoles and 2 copies of the game and whatever. So they've kind of, thought about it that way. For Card Fighters Clash, that's a good question, though, but I think it's definitely a killer app for the system.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to check it out.
Yep.
Heck yeah.
That's it for now.
All right. Well, that's
maybe more words later.
Yeah. Anything else tonight, guys? Or good to wrap it up there? Or?
That's all I got.
That's all I got too.
Beautiful. Same here. But I'm looking forward to digging into some games. Got the Game Jam coming up at the end of next month. Which when I say next month, it could be this month or maybe last month by the time this episode comes out. But nonetheless, the Game Jam right around the corner. I'm hoping that always gets my juices flowing again to get back on like the PC gaming again and stuff like that. So
we're on the third one already, I think.
Third one, baby. Third one. Yep.
Nice.
Damn.
Heck yeah.
It's awesome.
Heck yeah. But yeah, until next week, we'll catch you then. And hold on. I've almost forgot to do a little wrap up. Pursuing Pixels. You can find us Pursuing Pixels on the internet. Just look us up, Pursuing Pixels. And until next week, we'll catch you then. And take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Flubfest on that outro. I almost forgot.
That's fine.
It's where I type in pursuingpixels.com and see if it actually works or not.